Hey, high school umpires, new and medium and old. Chris Lundwall again, here with some content for you to consider, especially focused on the younger umpires who are moving up from Little League into the high school ranks. Appreciate your time and hope this is helpful. This is the third of four videos that I'm putting out there to cover off on what I call the four pillars of self-evaluation if you're an umpire. This is about timing and tempo, and entitled Focus on Process, Not Perception. So really focusing on two-man high school mechanics. Obviously, there's three-man out there, which is a little harder to find at the high school level and pretty common at the collegiate level. So anyway, the focus of this video is really to help newer umpires who are, like I said, progressing up to the high school levels and give them some thoughts to think about in the event that they don't have time to get to a school and get really the best education and the best instruction possible, which is really at the schools, whether it's pro school or NCAA school. That's where you want to get to. So anyway, don't want to take a lot of time. Just want to give you some thoughts to think about as you are managing the game and specifically looking at tempo and timing. If I can just get, there we go. Okay, context is always the same. Really, my experience is about the last 11, 12 seasons. I had a chance to go to awesome schools, have some fantastic mentors, made a lot of really valuable mistakes. And really, this is an emphasis on, like I said, the high school learning process for umpires, and really focus more on the new, but it's a refresher for anybody else who wants to take a look. And it's really just designed to help anybody improve. And if it does that, then it's met its goal. It is discussional, if that's even a word. It's designed to help you put in front of your mentors and your friends and your peers in the umpire community and your associations these concepts and these principles, and debate them and talk about them. And if there's better answers out there, better recommendations, that's awesome. There's certainly better content on the web than this. This is fairly rudimentary and is really the focus is on substance more than clearly more on substance than on style. A couple of plugs, if I could. Please get to school if you're a newer umpire in the first 4 years of your umpiring career. It's so important that you get great instruction early on after you've had enough experience to put that instruction into context. There are some great national schools that you can go to. I believe they're completely worth the money. And I believe the best part of those schools actually happens off the field versus on the field because of the instruction and the conversations you get at the 19th tee, so to speak. Also, there are local schools here in Colorado. RMAC puts on an awesome clinic. And also there's your master clinics. In the COVID world, we're not doing a lot of master clinics. They're more virtual, but just encourage you to take every single opportunity that you have to get to those venues and really go to pro school as fast as you possibly can. There's two venues for that. There's typically a 5-day, which is kind of a primer, and then you've got the 5-week course. That might have changed in the past couple of years, but there's two different varieties there that you can engage with. So if you don't want to go to the 5-week course to really truly go after a major league career, they do have that 5-day course for those who just want to learn as much as they can in a week. It's great stuff. I think you enjoyed it a ton. As it relates to a couple of plugs as it relates to equipment, I just always really encourage people to take a look at Force 3 Pro Gear because it's so safe. I believe it extends your umpiring career because of the safety and the technology, and I know the company does a great job of taking care of its customers. They are growing quickly because of the value of the products they put out there. And if you're an umpire who's getting into umpiring, maybe after your 40s or 50s, the investment is all that much more valuable as you want to, again, take those shots behind the plate, especially in a safe manner. Also, there's a company that I've come across recently that I'm pretty impressed with called Out West Officials. This is more for the college folks. If you're looking for college quality type products and a college focus, I know RMAC and some other of the other college umpires get their products and their materials and their supplies from out west officials, and everything I've seen from them so far is just awesome. So anyway, talking about safety and the products and investing in good stuff to make sure that you can umpire safely for a long time, and then just a really good resource if you're looking to go ahead and source some of those products. So with that being said, go ahead and think about getting to school as fast as you can, and in the meantime, provide this video for you to take a look at and consider as you're out there this summer and this spring practicing your craft. The four game management pillars that I've talked about. Number one is confidence at the plate. There's obviously a YouTube video out there that you can watch to talk a little bit about what a solid zone is and what the 80% rule is. There's a mobility on the bases video out there that talks specifically about blind spots and the importance of removing blind spots through mobility. This video is about timing on calls, and then there will be one more installment that talks a little bit about respect for all and kind of what the implications are in terms of body and verbal language when we're out there on the field. All right, timing at first base, position A, two-man mechanic. So priority number one, when you're out there here in the A position, is to pause, read, and react. And when there's contact with the ball, obviously, you want to move into fair territory and to get to your 90 degrees. So if you haven't heard of this before, the mechanic here is that if you've got a throw coming into first base, you want to position yourself at a 90-degree angle as it relates to that throw coming in. So throw coming in from third, 90 degrees, goes ahead and puts you right about here to jump into fair territory, get yourself locked in to go ahead and make that call. If the throw is coming in here from shortstop, again, 90 degrees is going to put you out right about here, so you're not as deep into the field coming in from the A position. When there's a throw coming in from second base, of course, you're not going to position yourself out of bounds. And so that's a situation where you're going to obviously come into fair territory, not at 90 degrees. Again, this is a guiding principle as opposed to a law as it relates to mechanics, but that's one way to evaluate your mobility and how you're getting into position to make your calls. So that doesn't change. That's the priority as it relates to being in the A position. So I want to talk a little bit about timing and making calls at first base specifically, which obviously is the A. So we talked a little bit about pausing, reading, and reacting and getting to 90 degrees. So I want to kind of just put this in the context of obvious plays and close plays at first base. There's a nuance here that I think it's important for you to think about and certainly talk about with your mentors and your association, debate it all that you'd like. I think it'll be helpful. But the guiding principle here is that don't worry about timing. So up here, the principle is let the correct mechanic determine the timing. Don't have anxiety about how fast or slow you should make the call. Focus on your mechanic, and your mechanic, if you do it correctly, will determine the timing, and the timing will be fine if your mechanic is done correctly. So it's one of those conversations about process and results, right? If you've got the right process, the results take care of themselves. Same principle. So as it relates to the first of two categories, obvious plays. If you've got an obvious play at first, which is the throw, clearly is beating the runner by a step or two or what have you, let the correct mechanic dictate the timing of the call, which means when you are in the A position, you get me into your 90 degrees, certainly into fair territory to make that call at first base. Number one, see the catch, which means you've got firm. What that means is that you can see that there's firm control. You're listening for the pocket pop. In other words, the ball is in the pocket and it's secured. The next thing you're looking at from a mechanic perspective in terms of your eyeballs after you see the catch is to see the touch. So you want to see the foot in contact with the bag as it relates to the first baseman. You want to see the release after that touch, which is the voluntary release of the ball from the glove. There's been a lot of talk this spring about different transfer calls that have been made, which is fantastic. But the rule is that there's voluntary release. You've got to voluntarily release it from the glove, the ball from the glove. So those are the first three things from a mechanic's perspective that you're looking for. right? And again, we're talking about obvious plays. We're not talking about a banger where you've got to look down and see quickly when that foot is touching, the runner's foot is touching the bag. These are obvious plays. So see the catch, check for firm control. See the touch, make sure the foot's in contact with the bag. See the release, make sure that when the first baseman steps away from the bag after touching it, that he voluntarily releases the ball from the glove. And then the fourth mechanic is really just take a breath. But do a mental replay. Make sure that you did see firm control. Make sure in your mind you did see contact. Make sure that you do see a voluntary release. And then the call is just this, the signal is just a simple hammer. It's calm, it's crisp, it's confident, it's nonverbal. And I don't know of many cases where people actually verbalize he's out on such an obvious call. It's more just a very simple move up from your athletic position and take a stand and simply just throw a simple hammer, nothing dramatic. And then you just reset, walk directly back to the A position and look to your plate umpire for the mechanic for the next play. So that's, again, you may say, well, that's really obvious, but I'm breaking it down just a little bit so that you kind of know what your eyes are supposed to do from a mechanic's perspective on a simple, obvious play. Now, as it relates to close plays at first base, talked a little bit on previous videos, especially the strike zone video, about the fact that for the past several years, the data that's come out from the major leagues about bangers at first is that about 49%, almost half the time a banger is at first base is challenged, it's overturned. That's how difficult it is to get that right. So here's some thoughts on mechanics, again, that you can think about. And if you run the mechanic correctly in your head, you don't have to worry about timing because timing will take care of itself. So again, very, very simple. And again, it's designed to be repetitive and replicable. So number one, see the catch. Again, you're checking for firm control. You're listening for a pocket pop, which indicates audibly that the ball has settled in the pocket of the glove. Next, you're going to see the touch. Again, foot in contact, first baseman's foot in contact with the bag. You're going to see the release of the ball from the glove. You're going to pause and mental replay. And again, that mental replay is really important because, again, in that see the touch mechanic, not only are you looking for the foot in contact with the bag of the first baseman, you're looking for the foot in contact with the bag of the runner. And that's why bangers are so challenging, because you've got to look at a call, you've got to hear a call in terms of firm control on the catch, and then you very quickly got to see two different feet in contact with the bag and the cadence and the chronology of that contact. So this is where the pause, that fourth step, is so important. Take a breath. You're not in a hurry. The play is in a hurry, but you're not in a hurry. Take a pause, take a breath, and mentally replay seeing the catch, seeing the touch by the bag by the baseman, by the runner, see the release voluntarily of the ball from the glove. Again, that's what you're replaying in your head. Take a breath and then make the call. And again, because it's a close call, this is where a lot of umpires prefer to throw a hard punch and get their whole body involved to accentuate the fact in a loud way. You're calling this out audibly. He's out. It's a full body motion and it's conclusive. It's not merely confident. You are conclusive. They talk you talk in the umpiring arenas about selling a call. You're not trying to sell something because it's bad or good. You're trying to be conclusive because you're certain of what you saw. So that's where you're accentuating that and making sure everyone understands, not only audibly, but visibly with your body language, that you got this and you saw what you saw. And again, at that point, there's no reason to do anything more than reset. Just walk directly back over to A and look at the plate umpire for your next mechanic on the next play. So obvious versus close plays, the mechanics are almost the same. But the main thing I want to convey here is that both types of calls take the same time because they use the same mechanic. It's just the pace of play and the call intensity that vary. So think about that, consider it. Again, on close plays, that second mechanic of seeing the touch really should say see the touches. There's more than one touch there, but that takes a lot of practice, and that's where you get your reps in. We had a great training the other day in our association, and Ross Chase, our president, did a great job of calling out that you've got to get reps in to get to really develop this skill. And as it relates to the A position and the banger or the close plays at first, that's just a lot of reps. And so training yourself to see two different feet from two different players in cadence and the chronology in which they go ahead and hit that bag is just so important. So stating the obvious, I know, but this is something for you to think about. And the main message here is don't let the play determine your cadence on making the call. The timing is the same if you use the same mechanic. And that pause, that breath you take to mentally replay what you saw is absolutely important and critical. It doesn't have to be a long pause. It just needs to give you the ability to very briefly say in your mind, this is what I saw. The mechanic is sound, and now I'm going to throw the right call in terms of being a simple hammer on an obvious call or a hard punch on a close one. All right, as it relates to some thoughts on position B and C, again, two-man mechanic. Now we're talking about a priority number one. Again, it's pause, read, and react, right? That is the priority number one when you're in those positions. But now we're talking about moving to 45 or 60 degrees. The thought here is that if you're starting this play in the C position, probably going to have time to get to 45. It's going to be, again, depends on the play. It always depends on the play. It always depends. But the general guidance here is that if you're in C when the play starts, probably going to have time to get comfortably to get to 45 degrees. And I'm talking about this 90-degree angle at second. If you split it, you got 45 degrees. You're going to be about 10 to 12 feet off of that. If you're in the B position, however, you've got an excellent opportunity to actually get to 60 degrees. And so if you can get to this 60-degree angle as it relates to this 90-degree bag, that is again a recommendation for you to consider. You've got a wider window to look at as it relates to the backside of the bag. Not that that'll be entirely in play on a force play here, but again, those are the two thoughts. If you're in C, get to 45. If you're in B, get to 60. And the mobility obviously gives you the right window. Again, the principle does not change. Let the correct mechanic determine the timing. So timing on these calls at second base, and I'm really just focused right now on the force play at second. Force slide rule is force slide rule, is in play. We're looking at a double play scenario. So again, there's lots of other scenarios here, but I'm specifically in this slide talking about the double play scenario and how the mechanic that you want to consider to make sure you got the best timing possible on the call. So first of all, before the pitch is thrown, if you're in B or C, it's just always a good idea to take a big deep breath and pause, read the situation, obviously where the runners are, what your assignment is on the play, whether it's 2-man or 3-man. But the main thing before the pitch is thrown is you want to anticipate. You want to anticipate what you think the play will be based on where the ball goes. Ground ball in the infield, anticipate, obviously, that they're, again, based on the number of outs, right? If they've got 0 outs or 1 out, then you're pretty sure that they're going to move for a double play motion. So the main thing on the pre-pitch is just take a big deep breath, read the situation, get it really clear in your mind, and anticipate what you think will happen. And then on the post pitch, you're going to do what you always do. You're going to pause, you're going to read, and you're going to react. And that reacting includes mobility. So you're going to move from the working area to again, we've already talked about where you want to get to based on where you're at. C will try to get to 45 degrees, B will try to get to 60. Again, this is about maximizing the window that you can see everything in play in terms of the ball, the tag, the touch, and both players, whether it be defensive or offensive. Mechanic, again, really simple. See the catch. Make sure you've got firm control in the glove or the hand. And the reason I say glove or hand is some of the advanced players, when they're coming up to that, the defensive player coming up to that second base to make the double play, in some cases, they'll use the back of the glove instead of the pocket of the glove, and they will use the back of the glove to block that ball when it's coming in on an easy toss or an easy throw, and they will grab the ball with their right hand to make sure they set up for a little bit faster release to first. So again, you're looking for firm control, and just be aware, based on the level of baseball that you're watching, that there are different interpretation about how that would happen, but you've got to make sure that they have firm control of the ball when they make the catch or the first possession. So second piece is in the mechanic is see the first touch. So the defensive foot first to the bag. By rule, on second, when it comes to second base, third base, and home, all right, be aware that it's incumbent on the defense to get to the bag first. When you're talking about a force play at first base, you're probably aware, and if you're not, that's okay. But at first base, it's incumbent upon the runner to beat the throw, beat the touch at first. So the runner's got to be first at first, and the defense has to be first at second, third, or home base on a force play. That's important. And again, as umpires, we know there's no such thing as a tie. And if there ever was such thing as a tie, if there was a tie at first base, then the runner would be out because the runner has to beat the throw to first. And on its second and third, if there was ever a tie, not that there ever would be, but if there was ever a tie, then of course the runner would be safe because the defense has to be first on a force play to second, third, or home. So that's the second mechanic. And the question you're asking yourself very quickly is, did the defensive foot hit the bag first? Second, the third piece of this mechanic is see the release, voluntary release. Here's something that you can think about. Again, transfer plays, transfer calls are a big part of this game. They tend to happen when it's very important in a baseball game. They can change the trajectory of a game pretty quickly. So here's something for you to consider if you've got a transfer situation at second base on a double play. Well, number one is, and I'm not saying this is religion, I'm not saying this is a regulation, I'm saying this is just a guiding principle for you to consider when you're trying to make a call in a very quick space of time. Number one is, did the ball, when the defensive man receives the ball at second base, did the ball drop from the bottom of the glove, or did the ball pop up from the top of the glove? So again, just something for you to consider. But typically, when a defensive player is taking a ball out of a glove to throw it to first base, they're typically taking the ball out of the top of the glove or the side of the glove. So if they're doing that and they lose a grip on the ball, that ball will tend to pop up out of the glove, if you will, because they're trying to pull the ball up out of the glove. Makes sense, right? If the ball drops from the bottom of the glove, then that would contradict what we just said. And that would suggest the ball is actually dropping out of the glove and is involuntary and therefore is not a transfer. Very few defensive players try to take a ball out of the bottom of their glove when they go to throw on a sequential motion. So again, this is just something for you to consider. Consider it and talk about it in your associations and with your mentors. But if you're in a situation where you make a call at second base and it's challenged by the coach and they want to come out and talk to you, a very simple answer for the coach is, Coach, it was not a transfer. The ball came out of the bottom of the glove. That's not voluntary. That's an accident. And that is why I made the call. I saw it entirely. I had angle and distance, and I want to go ahead and let's get back to playing the baseball game. If you've got a very simple explanation like that, then that conversation can go pretty quickly, and the coach in many cases will say, okay, I haven't heard that, but now I understand it. So you're telling me, Blue, that if you would have seen that ball come out of the top of the glove, you would have had a transfer call, and you would say, yeah, absolutely, because that would be a voluntary release. That's typically where the ball would come out. So think about that, talk about it, consider it, and this summer, try it out, see how it goes. So as it relates to the first call, after you've got those three mechanics, see the catch, see the first touch, consider what the ruling is in terms of who's got to be to the bag first and second, which is the defensive player. And then as it relates to the release, make your call. And you want to signal that and visibly, and you want to also audible that. Make sure that's an audible call as well, so everybody understands what you called. You want to pivot to follow the ball to first base as the second baseman throws it to first base, obviously. But my point is that you're not in your mind saying, "Oh, I have to pivot." What you're really doing is following the ball anyway, and as your eyes follow the ball from the release by the baseman at second to first base, you're just naturally going to let your eyes pull your body around to go ahead and pivot and get in a position to be locked in to see that second play, which will happen at first base. And again, repeat the process at this point on the mechanic. See the catch, make sure you've got firm control. Definitely listen for that pocket pop. Can be very difficult. Here in Colorado, we have a lot of games with a lot of wind, and it can be very hard sometimes to hear a pocket pop, especially when you're 60, 65, 70 feet away on a 90-foot base path. So anyway, you're looking to see that catch in terms of firm control. You want to see the release after you see the touch of the runner and the first baseman as it relates to the bag. And then you're going to pause and mentally replay that in your head. And again, not a long pause, but take a breath and mentally play it back. And of course, the key thing that you're mentally playing back is, when did you hear the audible pop of the glove? When did you see the touch did you see the touch of the foot by the first baseman on the bag? And did you see the touch of the base runner hitting the bag? And make your call. The call number 2 will typically be a hard punch because it's going to be a close call. And again, you want that to be loud, full body, and conclusive. What you're adding to that is, after you make that call number 2, you're going to turn your body back towards second base, and you're going to repeat that call at second. Out of two, so that everyone sees what happens before the play completely ends. So anyway, I wanted to go ahead and just illustrate that there's a couple of things to consider carefully as it relates to mechanics. But again, the guiding principle here doesn't change. Do not let the pace of this play determine the pace of your call. Focus on your mechanics. Get your steps down. Make sure you take your breath, and then make the right call with the right conviction. It's the intensity that will vary. It's not the timing. So that's helpful. As it relates to tempo, and it's definitely our job as umpires to determine tempo. If a baseball game is going slow, not completely, but in large part, it may have something to do with the way we're managing the game. So the green light here is to always be proactive as an umpire. Know how you're going to respond to a coach's objections. So the point here is that you can control tempo based on your mental approach to conversations with coaches. They don't need to be long and drawn out. They don't need to be like they are on YouTube with these long, extended situations or ejections or conflicts. That's not high school baseball. It needs to be just a very brief, crisp conversation. But if it's going to be brief and crisp and clear, you need to know how you're going to respond to it before it happens. So a green light in terms of moving forward with good tempo in a baseball game as an umpire is to anticipate how you're going to respond to the objection a coach may have. And then secondarily, the red light, the thing that can really slow a game down, right? You want to avoid being a concierge umpire. And I really say this to the new umpires who have done Little League and are really excited about moving into high school. You've got to get away from any habits you might have developed that had to do with accommodating coaches or parents or anything like that. You need to know when you will and when you will not get help at a coach's request. In high school, you cannot be in the business of answering every question and accommodating every coach who doesn't like a call that you make. You got to know, hey, it's either a pulled foot or it's a check swing. If it's not, the only reason I'm going to go ahead and get help is if I'm out of position. And I understand when I'm out of position as an umpire. So those are the red light and the green light. Little things that prevent slow, painful baseball from happening. I have a family member who's told me for years that nothing is more painful than slow baseball, and I tend to agree with that. So here are 5 things you can consider to keep the pace of the baseball game moving briskly. Number 1, punctuality. And again, you'll notice that you have almost complete control over all 5 of these things, which is why it's essentially a gas pedal for moving the ball game along swiftly. Number 1, you want to walk the field and confirm umpires are on the premises 30 minutes before the game starts. Number 2, you want to be present at the plate meeting 10 minutes before the game starts, not 5 minutes. Why not 5 minutes? Because if you run into a couple of coaches that you've not had before and they want to talk a lot, you're going to manage that conversation certainly, but you've got to be careful about coaches that want to talk too much about too many things at that plate meeting. I mean, it's very important that it be crisp and clear, and it's very important that you start the game on time. So consider being at the plate 10 minutes early. You know, the recommendation in high school baseball is to be there generally 5 minutes earlier, but in many cases anyway, the baseball teams will be ready to start and at least have a plate meeting about 10 minutes before the game starts. So try to do that if you can, and it will get everything off to a really good start, and it will accommodate the risk for chatty coaches, chatty conversations. At the plate meeting, number 2, again, be brief. Get to the ground rules as fast as you can. That's really, arguably, that's one of the most important things you're going to cover at the plate. You're obviously going to exchange lineup cards. You're going to confirm that everyone is equipped in accordance with NFHS rules, safety, etc. But the real conversation, as it relates to applying your craft as an umpire during the game, is you want to get that to the coaches. The home coaches walk around the field, and you want to get to consensus on exactly what the ground rules are going to be in consideration of any nuances that field has to offer. You know, where's the catch and carry? How's the bullpen being managed, etc. Number 2, go ahead and teach ball management at the plate meeting. Again, you can do this very, very quickly. All it is you're at the plate with the coaches and your partner, and you just take a ball and say, listen, gentlemen, if I raise one ball during the game, if I raise one ball above my head and say I have one, that means I need 2 from each of you on the next foul ball. That's it. It takes 12 seconds to say that. But that sends a message that when you are down to 1 baseball, you're telling them they're going to go ahead and find 2 more baseballs each. That means on the next foul ball, you're going to have 1 ball to put into play, and you're going to have 2 balls from each side, 4 balls hit your ball pocket, and you're ready to go. There's debate on that, and you should have that debate inside your associations for sure. There's an argument to be made that, well, that can interrupt the cadence of the at bat, that can be an interruption, etc. And those are all good conversations to have, and you should have them. My point is that I've got to have baseballs to keep them in play. There's going to be an interruption anyway, and you could arguably say, wait a second, why don't you raise 2 balls and ask for 2 balls to come in when you're down to 2 balls, and you could do that as well. I'm just offering that this is a place for you to start. So teach box management at that plate meeting. Again, it doesn't take much time. It takes just a few seconds, but you should know based on the teams that are playing whether you have a risk of box mismanagement that may happen. There are certain teams, there are certain coaches, there are certain places where some coaches and some teams are notorious for playing head games with the pitchers. They get in the box and then they get set and then they ask for time. And all they're trying to do is just mess with the pitcher and destroy some cadence, etc. Who knows, right? There's lots of reasons people do that. But if you know you may have one of those teams and one of those coaches there at the plate meeting with you, it takes just a few seconds to say, gentlemen, batters in the box, stay in the box. I'll decide on freezes. I don't want you players deciding that for me. Move on. Teach foul management. And all that means is the on deck and the whole batter, either one is going to scrap up the foul balls that hit right behind you in the net or the backstop, and they're going to pick them up and clear those out quickly. And you new umpires, this is going to resonate with you probably the most. But obviously the veteran and the tenured umpires all understand this, but it's the job of the on deck batter or in the whole batter to make sure that when that happens, that they're scurrying back to the backstop, picking up that ball and getting out of the way. And you're using your peripheral vision to make sure they've safely cleared out so you can move on with the next pitch. But as you do C-squad and, take on some teams maybe that are not, either coached or understanding of some of the protocols of baseball, may be a situation where you at the plate would want to go ahead and make sure that's clear. All right, so those are the first two things that you can do as an umpire before the game starts to make sure that the tempo gets off correctly. Number 3 is pitch management. So starters and returning pitchers, they will tend to throw until their catcher tells them to stop, and that's not a good thing. So you want to make sure that the catcher knows exactly how many warm-up pitches they get, whether it's a starting pitcher or returning pitcher or a new pitcher. And as long as the catcher knows that you know, and you know that the catcher knows, that goes extremely well. And during warm-ups, one thing that's recommended is that you track the pitches on the foul line facing the batting team. So what you're doing during those warm-up pitches is you're literally standing there on the foul line facing the team that's going to be up to bat, and you're maybe 15, 20 feet up the line. And so you're just watching the pitcher and you're watching the catcher, but you're tracking those. And when you get to the point where there's only 2 pitches left in the warm-ups, you just raise your hand over and with 2 fingers and toward the batter who's on deck and say, "Batter, we've got 2 more." That is extremely, extremely valuable. And it's done you watch a college game, that's actually in my opinion, that's a standard college mechanic. But what that does is the catcher who's right there 20 feet away from you can hear you say that. They're confirming, no matter what they're thinking about, the date last night, what the coach said in the dugout, whether or not their shoes fit. What it does is it makes that catcher completely aware that they've got 2 throws. So they'll throw one back at that point, they'll throw one back to the pitcher, and then they announce they're throwing it down on the second one. But that aligns and clicks the batter, the on-deck batter, and the pitcher and the catcher into a very simple cadence that says there's only 2 more left. Everybody knows it. We know what to do. And then the minute the second that throw goes down to second, you're on the plate with your brush, and then 2 seconds later, you're in your set position, ready to go ahead and put the ball in play. So that's pitch management. Consider it. And if you've never noticed that before watching a college game, just take a look at the umpire in between innings, and you'll see it. It's pretty cool. But that's a very, very important thing at the high school level to keep the cadence the way it should be in terms of game tempo. Number 4, pace the battery. So the battery, by definition, really is the pitcher, the catcher, and the batter, right? It's that distance between the pitcher and the home plate and the catcher. And so what you're going to do in addition to pitch management, you're going to go ahead and pace the battery. So what that means is during the game, you want to be standing in your slot, whether you're in a super slot or whether you're a regular slot, or maybe you don't use this, maybe you use a different mechanic. I wouldn't recommend it, but I would definitely be in the slot. But you want to be in that slot before the pitcher, the batter, and the catcher are ready. You want to be the first one, because the minute they sense that you are ready, they will get ready. But if you make the mistake as an umpire of waiting for them, now you've got some game management. From a tempo perspective, you're going to have some game management issues because they'll get around to it, or they'll do what they want. So, and again, you don't have to say a word. It's all body language. But the second that you get into your slot and you're standing there with your feet exactly where they're going to be when you see that pitch, when you're there, they get there, and they get there much more quickly. Now, sometimes you got a batter who's waiting on a coach. Again, at the younger levels, C squad, JV levels, newer coaches, etc., newer players. So you younger umpires, you're often going to see that their choreography, if you will, of getting that signal into the batter may not be very quick. So what you want to do in that situation is you want to, again, be in your slot, your standing slot first, and then the minute that you're ready to go, Again, you see that pitcher take the plate. You want to verbally say, when you're ready, batter. And again, you're not chastising them, you're not telling them what to do, you're not coaching them. But typically when a player hears you say, when you're ready, batter, they will interpret that as, oh, we're all waiting on them. And in many cases we are. But that's just a verbal cue that will expedite the process of getting the batter in the box and ready to go. And if the coach hasn't given the signal or what have you, it often the batter will defer to the umpire who says we're ready to go, rather than standing outside the box for 5 or 6 or 8 more seconds waiting for the coach to get around to getting a signal in. So again, I'd encourage you to consider that and put it to the test this weekend or when you're doing your next tournament. But use that verbal cue of, you just got to make sure you're set when you do it, because you're ready, catcher's ready, pitcher's ready. You want to give the batter the impression that we're all ready to go when they're ready to go. Last thing is, and this is something I see at the college level, so I'm really asking, you new high school umpires to take a great lesson from the collegiate ranks and your tenured and senior ranks in high school, which is economize your movement as a plate umpire between pitches. What I mean by that is, if you don't need to move out of your slot, don't move. If you're in your slot and the pitch is a ball, why do you need to move? There's no need. You can just you're bent at the knees, the pitch comes in, it's a ball, you call ball. You can stand up without moving your feet and you're ready to go for the next pitch. So staying in the slot as much as possible will help tremendously with the timing and the tempo of the game. Some umpires, especially young umpires, they get active feet or crazy feet. They think they've got to move after every pitch, or they've got a nervous habit of stepping back after every pitch and looking down at their indicator or what have you. And again, I'm not knocking it. We've all been young umpires at some point in our careers, but you want to get away from that. And when you really look at an awesome seasoned umpire behind the plate, they don't move unless they have to. It is awesome. It's just impressive. It's something you take for granted. When you see it, most of the time you don't even notice it. But when you go to a game and you see a plate umpire who does not make unnecessary movements as it relates to feet and hands and twitches and looking around, and they are simply, it's almost, you get the impression that 80% of the time there's not an active play in motion where they've got to be somewhere for an assignment. If they are simply, it seems like they're just constantly in their slot waiting for the next pitch. That is brilliant, and that's intentional, and that's the sign of a very, very experienced, wise umpire, because it moves the game along. All right, number 5, bookkeeping. Just again, really for the new umpires more than anything else. But when it comes to lineup cards, well, I call it lineup card logistics. If you can be flopping all over the place, you can be all fingers and trying to find the lineup cards, and they're folded funky because you didn't take enough time when the game started to fold them with crisp creases so that they're easy to take in and take out. So and you may be keeping them in a back pocket instead of in a place where they're more accessible or easy to get in and easy to get out. But a couple of things for you to think of is, when it comes to the lineup card, at the beginning of the game, at the plate, take the time to fold the lineup cards neatly. Fold them one inside the other, same creases, and just take a little bit of extra time to make sure that they're easy to unfold and easy to refold. And then one other thing that I've seen umpires do that I think is an awesome little trait or little behavior is they tend to track visits to the mound just on the back of one of the lineup cards. So they'll literally draw a T chart, and on the left side they'll have visitor, and on the right side they'll write in, again, before the game starts, take 2 seconds, right on the left side home, or on the right side visitor, and then on the left margin they will write visits. And some guys actually even track courtesy runners with the same chart. But visits specifically, they don't require you to know a number. You're just tracking a number of visits by a coach to a pitcher before they replace them. And so it's very simple, but it can move the game along. And if you don't have to unfold papers and refold papers to track visits. If you're not keeping track of that, if you're keeping track of it on the back of one of those neatly folded lineup cards, it's just really, really simple and saves you the time of unfolding back. And then the other thing, it sounds crazy, but ergonomics are a big deal. I mean, where are you going to put your lineup cards? Typically, you've got some type of a leather folder or what's the word I'm looking for? Your whatchamacallit, sorry, your folder that you put your lineup card in, and you've also got some paper there that you can write on. And so ergonomically speaking, what I have found and what I would recommend you consider, because it's just what I've seen that works so well, is if you've got a good front pocket and you're comfortable putting it there, that's easy to get in and easy to get out. The other place is in your left ball bag, because typically you've got a lot of times on your right ball bag, you'll have several baseballs. You may even have your brush in there. And if you go ahead and put your lineup cards in there too, that's the best. So your left ball bag, again, how you do things matters. Again, talk it through, get some feedback and some input. But what I found is, ergonomically speaking, if you keep your lineup cards in your left ball bag, it's easy to get to, easy to get in, easy to get out, and then again, that front pocket. So little things, but they add up over the course of a game. I want to go ahead and conclude by talking a little bit about umpire's perspective as it relates to the conflict clock. So when you've got conflict and you're trying to keep a game's pace sustained, then these are some things that you can think about. And again, do not try to take this all in on one game and one day. Maybe take one or two of these things and think about it during a doubleheader or what have you, but incrementalize yourself into these concepts. And over the course of a summer, if you're doing 100 or 200 games, you'll be amazed at how fast you start to put all this stuff together. So number one, I would say, again, I'm speaking largely to newer umpires or umpires looking for a refresh. But know, number one, who the umpire in charge is, and let them do their job and learn from them. You may be the plate umpire. If you've got a situation developing and you've got your senior veteran umpire out there with you, certainly as a plate umpire, you have responsibilities and you want to manage those responsibilities and you want to grow from the experience. But don't let your ego tie you down or get you into trouble. And conversations with the umpire in charge are always, in my opinion, are a good thing. You just don't want to do them at the right time, right? But just keep in mind that you're surrounded by mentors who know more and have done more than you have, and rely on them if you have that ability. If you are on a field and you are the seasoned mentor there and the umpire in charge, then there's your opportunity to grow, and hopefully you're prepared for that situation. But being teachable is just so critical, right, to improving as an umpire, especially with a game that can get so complicated. Number two, resolve conflict early and clearly. If you've got conflict that's starting to bubble up in the first or second inning, it's got to be resolved in the first or second inning, or you're going to be stuck with it for a long time, and that will disrupt the game from a game management perspective, and it'll probably disrupt the tempo of the game as well. So manage things early. I'm not explicitly saying manage things directly and overtly. There are different ways to manage game situations early on that may not even involve direct conflict, but make sure you identify them early and have a plan to resolve them early. The next thing is to listen to coaches with an open posture. If you're an umpire and you've got a closed posture, your body language says, I don't care what you have to say, something along those lines, or in any way, shape, or form is disrespectful, it's not good, obviously. So consider having an open posture. This picture on the back of this text shows an umpire with an open posture. He's got his arms down, his shoulders are back, making eye contact, he's calm. That's perfect. The main thing I would say there, though, is when you listen to the coach, make sure when they ask you a question, you answer that question and answer it once. You don't need to answer it more than once. After you've done that, you've met your responsibility and you're ready to move on and resume play. Next is don't interrupt the coach. It will produce longer and more agitated conversation. So again, it's about respect. It's about understanding what they're trying to say and evaluating whether or not what they have to say introduces something you may not have thought of. But please, please, please be patient. And when you're listening to that coach, especially young umpires, you may feel like you know what happened. You may feel like you're completely locked in as to making the right call and doing things correctly. That's not the point. The point at that point is to understand what they're trying to say. And once you assess that after not interrupting them, then you can very briefly and succinctly address their issue and move on with play. The next one is to confirm that you understand the coach's concern observation. Again, I'm being a little repetitive here, but it's so important. And then respond once. Do not get in the game of responding to the same question several times. Just respond once and move on. That's what your job is. Know if you had it. Next is know if you had angle and distance and line of sight, and respond responsibly. If you know on the call that you made that you were in the right position in terms of angle and distance, and that you had a clear view and that you saw the tag specifically by way of example, then just responsibly say, that's what you had. I had position, coach. I was in the right place. I saw what I saw. We need to move on. Be responsible with that. What that means is if you were not in the right place, angle and distance, then own it and say, coach, I understand what you're saying. Let me go ahead and either respond with, I did have line of sight. I may not have been in the right spot, but I did see the tag clearly. And if you're in a situation where either your angle, distance, or line of sight is compromised, then being responsible and accountable means owning that and determining what to do. And that may be a situation where you get help, or it may be a situation where you just have to say, coach, I did the best I could with what I had. I'm not in a position to get help. And so we've got to move on. But again, the tone and the respect that you bring to that conversation is critical, and the accountability will speak volumes for who you are as an umpire. If you try to insist that you had angle and distance, and everyone knows that you didn't, then you have a reputation issue that's going to pick up and bite you. Next is stay calm, keep your perspective, and know what you know and know what you don't know, and then move on. I don't think I need to spend too much time on that. You will, more than they will, dictate the tone of that conversation, and your ability to stay calm and clear is critical. And that is our job. Now, next one is remember the coach's point of view. Again, they want to know most of the time when the coach comes out there, what they want to know from you is, were you in position to make that call? And again, we've already talked about this, but that's the question. So that's the one you want to answer as fast as possible. In terms of managing the clock when you're addressing conflict, get to that answer as fast as you can. Coach, I had angle, I had distance, I clearly saw the tag. You've got to move on. Well, I'm not sure you did. I appreciate that you have that perspective, coach, but I know what I know, and I saw what I saw, and I was in position to see it. Really got to move on. Let's get back to playing baseball. Okay, well, blah, 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 right? There's a million different ways that can go, but if you are insistent and you've answered that question twice, that's it. Again, I said earlier, answer it once, but if you've got a conflict and the game is pivoting on this call and it's very important, etc., I would go ahead and consider answering it twice, but I would answer it very much the same way to make sure that the coach understands you're clear on exactly what you saw and why you made the call. Next is don't hide behind rules or your authority. Again, as a new umpire, you may have the jitters, you're still learning the rules. God knows this can be a complicated game, right? So couple of things as it relates to not using the rules or your authority to cloak, potential mistakes you made, etc. So coaches can't, by rule, coaches cannot argue balls and strikes technically, right? That's just not allowed at the high school level. It's not actually allowed at the other two levels either, college and pro. But if you know you're not solid, and solid is an acronym that you picked up from the first video I did on the strike zone, if for whatever reason, you black out for 2 innings and you just, get disoriented or what have you, if you're missing pitches and you know it, then you need to be a little bit patient with their impatience, because you're the source of that. It's not that they woke up on the wrong side of the bed. It's if you're having a bad day, if you're missing pitches, if you're not focused on your craft that afternoon, whatever it is, if you're not where you need to be as far as being solid and managing the 80% rule as it relates to the strike zone, then then you need to be patient with a coach who's maybe being patient with you. Again, that's more of a moral issue or a moral code of conduct than it is a regulatory one, but that's in a spirit of fair play. The next is coaches must technically remain professional and sportsmanlike, right? That's in the rules. But again, if you are out of position and you miss a call and they're upset about it, you got to cut them some slack because they're justifiably upset. They may be breaking, quote unquote, the rule by being a tad unprofessional or agitated more than you may want them to be. But again, if you made a mistake, and especially at a difficult time, you're going to have to be a little bit more patient than normal with their response to that. So again, it's about maturity. But again, you younger umpires, I would really encourage you to not get in the habit of using the rules and your authority as a means of addressing maybe some mistakes that you're making. Rather, just stand up and own it. Be honest, be upfront, be candid, and then move on. Next is avoid yelling. If you've got a coach that wants to talk to you from 40 feet away from the dugout about just about anything, and as a new umpire where you're doing, C squad or, early high school games, you're probably going to run into that. So one thing that you can do that's extremely impressive is just go ahead and close the distance. So you're not going to do that in the middle of a pitch count, but at the right time, you can go ahead, walk over, in between innings, what have you, and just close the distance and show them by the way that you act that you're happy to talk to them, but that you prefer not to do the yelling, the long distance conversations. Avoid ejecting, especially coaches. Again, in high school, we have 5 steps to ejection. And so those, know those and use them as much, unless you shouldn't. I mean, there are situations where you've got to move to an immediate ejection. They're not very often. They're almost never, especially if you're really focused on game management. If you're solid at the zone and you got mobility on the bases, and you're pretty clear on your timing and your tempo, it's pretty hard to get to an ejection situation. But if there is a situation that is developing, do everything you can to avoid ejecting a coach. A player, again, avoid ejecting if you can, but avoid ejecting a coach. And if you do several of these things, you can probably gonna be able to avoid it. But from a high school perspective, pretty good idea to get your arms around those 5 steps, because if you do get to an ejection situation, you're gonna have to be accountable for it. You're gonna have to write up some paperwork and submit that and justify it. All right, the last thing here is me just encouraging you to speak to your mentors about game management and ejections. Get some really good feedback, get some context and some color. There's not a one size fits all. There really isn't. And that's where if you're on the field and you've got a veteran umpire that's your mentor that you're working with, and these things, by chance do happen, gosh, it's just so instructional to have that access to that mentor. So I'm just going to share with you 5 things that I've heard over the years, and you can take them or leave them. But one of the mentors that I've worked with, he's actually a former major league umpire. He spent 10 years in the bigs. Fascinating guy. I love working with him. Learn tons every time I do. But he told me one day, after I had ejected a coach, we were talking and doing the debrief after the game, and he was giving me, I had asked for some feedback, and he said, listen, if you're not ejecting a coach every 10 games, you're not doing your job. And I hadn't ejected, I don't think I had ever ejected a coach up until that game. And so again, we had a long, great conversation about context, but he just cut to the chase and said, that's how he approaches things, and that's the tone and tenor that he brings to a game. He's very firm, he's very clear, he's an expert in my opinion, but he has a certain line, and he just finds that it gets crossed about every 10 games. So anyway, take that for what it's worth or not worth. Another mentor of mine said stellar game managers use rabbit ears and side convos preemptively. And what he meant by that was that he's just constantly scanning with his eyes and his ears, different conversations, different players are having, different sounds that are coming from the dugout or the field. So he's constantly got kind of a radar out to measure energy, potential conflicts that are going on. And he will dive into that preemptively, which means when he starts to sense that energy levels are getting a little bit where they shouldn't be, or that a certain grudge is being held past a certain inning, he will start to move proactively to have side conversations with certain people to deflate those situations. So another mentor of mine said veteran game managers see the people inside the players and into the dugouts. So they're not just seeing a number and they're not just seeing a rule book. They're looking at the people who are the players. They're looking at their idiosyncrasies, their personalities, and they're constantly measuring and monitoring those players. And some players more than others, to be sure. But what was interesting to me was he said that he listens for sounds from the dugouts all the time. Not because he's insecure, obviously, but because if there's tension in the dugout, it may not have anything to do with the baseball game. It may have to do with personal issues. It may have to do with, some coaches being more, their style being more at odds with the players than other styles. It may have to do with two coaches who aren't getting along. Who knows? But he made the comment that he tries to keep his ears extending all the way to the dugout. And that particular mentor of mine, I've had for ever since I started umpiring, and he's a legend in my mind, and he is by far one of the best game managers I've ever seen. The next mentor has told me game management is managing the fifth inning and the second inning. Again, kind of comes back to this rabbit ears and side convos comment, but nothing should be out of control in the fifth inning if you can take care of it in the second. And you'll get, in many cases, not all, but in many cases, you'll start to sense, where some potential issues may be brewing in that first or second inning. And again, if you're proactive and preemptive and you start to manage those nuances, either directly or indirectly, they'll be dissipated and they won't happen in the fifth inning. Lastly, I've had a mentor tell me a calm ejection with margin. If you're going to eject, make sure you do it with marginal signaling. It illustrates maturity and it keeps the momentum of the game moving forward. So this is, again, an amazing college umpire mentor of mine who's just fantastic. And when he has done his ejections, he doesn't make a big deal. He doesn't, toss the guy into the sky. He doesn't have a bunch of big body language. He just basically puts his arm out, points his finger to the sky in a very, very calm way and moves on. So that speaks volumes for the fact that you're not emotionally involved in the dispute, that you understand the game, that you're in control of the game, even though a coach may be losing it, player may be losing it, what have you, you're in control. And that is what everyone wants you to be, is in control and calm and to understand something objectively, but firmly address it. So anyway, those are some comments that I've gotten over the years. You go get your own is what I would say to you. But as on the top of ejections, please, please, please don't be hostage to YouTube videos. Don't do that. That's not what you want to do, especially in high school. All right, last thing, really, really quick here is, so some classic clock stoppers, case study questions, if you will. What would you do? So if you've got a batter that's messing with the pitcher by asking for time when they get in the box, maybe at the same bat, they're asking for time 2 or 3 times. What are you going to do in that situation? Another source, a clock stopper could be an umpire. Maybe one of the umpires that's out there is rotating slow, maybe taking a little while to get to the A position, from the C after a play is made, etc. Or even sometimes, maybe there's a situation where just getting back on the field when innings switch. You know what I mean? So just and again, I'm talking about high school umpires. This does not have a college or the pros, but in the early stages or early levels of high school umpiring, sometimes that can be the case. So obviously, from an accountability perspective, we want to hold ourselves accountable as umpires. So batters can slow things down by messing with asking for time when they're in the box too much, or when they shouldn't, frankly. And again, if you're not familiar with those rules, understand that a batter may ask for time if they have a medical issue, which is to say they have something in their eye, which could be a safety concern, or if they're being frozen by the pitcher. Batter has about the pitcher typically has 20 seconds to throw, and the batter has 20 seconds to take that throw. Not very often that you get to 20 seconds, but again, those are the two instances: being frozen or having a medical, a disruption in your ability to see, or a safety issue. Those are the two reasons a batter can get out of the box. Normally, there are some exceptions, but that generally speaking, at the high school level, that's pretty much what you see. So if you got some abuse of that from the batter, that's going to slow down the game. We talked about maybe some umpire nuances, pitchers. So if they're messing with the batters by, obviously waiting too long to pitch, who knows why that could happen. As a new umpire in the high school ranks, you're probably going to have entry-level games, C-squad games. You're probably going to go do some 14U, 15U, 16U tournaments, right? You're going to run into some coaches who have a hard time getting their signals into their catcher, and the catcher's turning around trying to get that signal to the pitcher. So you've got to know the difference between a pitcher trying to freeze a batter and a situation where you got a pitcher who just can't see a signal. And again, in a spirit of goodwill and managing the game with goodwill, as an umpire, I would encourage you in those situations just to know the difference between freezing and just bad logistics, and just manage it. Lastly, coaches, probably the biggest offender there is just long conferences on the hill. And, how are you going to manage that? What is your approach going to be in those situations? I would encourage you to have conversations with mentors about that. There are different ways to do that. It may even depend on the partner that you've got. In a lot of cases, if I'm on the plate and I've got my partner obviously in the field, call it a nudge. But if you got a coach out there, rather than me walking all the way out there to the hill, maybe my partner who's in the B or C position may just kind of walk slowly over to the conference, not even say anything, but just walk in that direction. And we call that a nudge. And if he nudges them, then they break up and they're good to go. But again, traditionally, the plate umpire is responsible for moving that along. And if that's what you want to do, then just kind of know how long you're going to wait before you start that walk. And if you have to get all the way to if you have to get all the way to the pitcher's mound to break up that conference, that's going to send you some signals that you want to be aware of. But if they break up that conference while you're just kind of slowly moving in that direction, that's probably the way it should go. Anyway, those are some thoughts for you to think about as it relates to timing and tempo in a game. And I hope this is helpful. If it is, great. I'm pleased. And if it's helpful, I encourage you to share it with others. In a COVID world that we're living in, it's hard for us to get together and have a lot of conversations. And so hopefully these videos are helping you kind of learn on your own, and at least give you a platform to go ahead and have more extended conversations with other people as you approach the season in your games. Have an awesome season, and I wish you every success, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much.